Nick Marshall loves women, but in his own way. His mother danced in a ballet company, and so Nick's childhood was spent in the dressing room, where half-naked girls were constantly coming and going. For his mother, there was nothing more important than her son, and he became a real talisman for the dancers. Nick bathed in the attention of women from childhood, and therefore grew up a desperate womanizer who thoroughly studied the opposite sex. In the mornings, Nick is visited by a housekeeper whom he calls simply Bait. She collects dirty rags, unfinished whiskey, and snacks mixed in with women's underwear and sends them to be washed. Nick doesn't come to work before 10. He is an advertising agent, one of the best, and on this day he is due for a promotion. Nick is already congratulated by his colleague Morgan and his loyal secretaries. Nick arrives at the office of his boss, whose name is Deanne, Wanamaker, and he says that women now rule sales, which means that the position of creative director, which was supposed to go to Nick, must be filled by a woman, namely the recently fired advertising shark Darcy McGuire. Nick is naturally upset, but there is nothing he can do but obey. Although he thinks he will easily survive Darcy and take her place after an unpleasant conversation with his boss, Nick goes to his ex-wife's wedding wife, Gingy. There he is informed that Gingy and her new husband are going on their honeymoon, and that Nick's 16-year-old daughter, Alex, will be moving in with him during that time. His relationship with his daughter is not good, so they are not thrilled about this living arrangement. When Nick returns to work, Denker introduces the employees to Darcy McGuire. Darcy immediately took charge of the team and distributed boxes of things intended for them. Read her lips. Don turns on the music with feminine things from the box. However, at first, he doesn't do very well. Then Nick Burt takes a CD with teenage music for girls from his daughter's backpack, drinks even more alcohol, and gets down to business. He sticks a strip on his nose to clean his pores, smears his hair, paints his eyelashes and nails, and pulls out the hair on his leg with a wax strip 1 to 3 and, as the cherry on top, puts on tights. When he was about to go home, Alex returns with a friend, and they argue with their father. Alex accuses Nick of not caring about anyone and not even remembering her boyfriend's name. And when Nick remembers it and runs to tell his daughter, he drops a jar of granules, slips, and falls into the bathtub with water. The hair dryer he was holding in his hand lands next to Nick. She gives him a good electric shock, so much so that he falls to the floor and doesn't get up until morning. Nick is awakened by grumbling. However, when he made a remark to her, the woman said she hadn't said anything. At the hotel exit, Flo, as always, caught him a taxi. Nick thought he could hear her dirty thoughts. "Thanks, Flo. You're welcome. Nice ass." He decided to walk to work, and then, finding himself in a crowd of women, Nick realized that he hadn't imagined it at all. He really had started to hear the thoughts of women at work. He was attacked by the thoughts of his colleagues, and he didn't like them. His image as irresistible, adored by women, which had formed in Nick's head, was quickly crumbling. Nick even noticed Erin, the girl giving Nick a break in their heads. There is complete silence. He shares his experiences with Morgan, but Morgan thinks Nick is joking. He drags him to a meeting organized by Darcy, where everyone has to share their ideas about women's products. Nick also tried to come up with an idea about a naked girl under a waterfall and a lipstick advertisement, but his female colleague immediately protested, and he fell silent. Then Nick overheard his colleague's thoughts about taking headache pills even if her head doesn't hurt, just so she doesn't have to have sex with her husband. He liked the idea and shared it with the others. However, Darcy received it without enthusiasm, although she praised Nick for his originality. Nick realizes that he has failed. Moreover, he cannot think straight because of the constant hum of women's thoughts. So he returns home, kicks out his friend Alex, with whom she was going to prom, repeats everything he did the day before, and goes out onto the balcony during a thunderstorm with the hair dryer on. Lightning strikes the hair dryer. Nick passes out, but in the morning he can't check whether he has lost his ability around him. As if to spite him, not a single woman. Nick goes to the supermarket, which is full of women, and realizes that he continues to hear their thoughts. Then he rushes to the psychotherapist whom he and his ex-wife used to visit through trial and error. He proves to her that he really hears women. And the amazed psychotherapist reveals to Nick what women think about him. He can control them. Nick Burt takes the psychotherapist's advice and immediately goes to flirt with the company. He overheard her thoughts about Nike looking for a new advertising agency. It's a very large order, and Nick wants to take it on. However, Darcy warns him that it is important to think like a woman, because Nay wants to promote a new collection of women's clothing. Nick convinces Darcy that he can handle it. He listens to her thoughts and voices them faster than Darcy herself. At home, Alex is waiting for him with her school friends, and the girls are not thrilled with him. But Nick quickly rectifies the situation by promising his daughter that he will take her to get a dress for the prom. In the evening, he goes on a date with Lola. Afterwards, she invites him to her place. But because Nick hears all her thoughts, he can't concentrate, and nothing works out for him. But Nick is not one to give up easily. Faced with difficulties, he gathers his courage, goes to bed with Lola, and does everything Lola wants in her thoughts. After that, the girl literally melts with pleasure. Nick wants to get a contract with Nike because then he will be able to get rid of Darcy. So he eavesdrops on what women are thinking everywhere he goes. Music. He even charms all his female colleagues who previously had a low opinion of him. When Nick works with Darcy, he begins to admire her ability to create the right slogans. He hears her thoughts and adds his own. And that's how they come up with the best ideas. Darcy also begins to like Nick. It seems to me that Nick's relationship with Alex is also improving. They choose a dress for her prom together, and in the process, Nick overhears her thoughts about how she is going to sleep with her boyfriend after the prom. That is, I wanted to say that Nick decides to have a conversation with her about pistols and stamens, but Alex's mother has already talked to her about everything. And Nick doesn't need to pretend to be a caring father. The wayward father calls Darcy and invites her to a restaurant for a cocktail. In the process, Nick learns that Darcy is divorced. That's why she left her last job, because she and her husband work together. After spending a pleasant evening together, they kiss and then go home. Darcy wanted to invite Nick to her place, but he didn't let her say it. When Nick returns home, Lola is waiting for him at the door. For 6 days after their meeting, she couldn't find her place because Nick never called her. She thinks he's gay because he understands her so well. In her mind, she begs him to admit his orientation. Then she will leave him for someone else. So Nick says that he is gay at work. Nick again eavesdrops on Erin's thoughts, who considers herself invisible. He asks the secretaries about her, and they tell him that she once wanted to write copy for advertisements, but Nick rejected her application. On this day, there is to be a presentation of an advertisement for Nike. Darcy convinces Nick that he is the one who should give the presentation. Although he tries to explain to her that she came up with most of the ideas, Darcy doesn't think so. The presentation goes very well. In the evening, Nick writes a message to Darcy in which he wants to confess that he stole almost all of her ideas, but then Darcy herself comes in and invites Nick to her new apartment where they spend a romantic evening. If there was a bed here, we would dance on it. The next day, Nick learns from his boss that Nak has agreed to sign the contract, but he fired Darcy. Nick says that he should bring her back. After all, she came up with almost all the moves for the Nike advertisement. He himself goes to her to explain himself. On the way, Nick learns that Erin didn't go to work today, and there is no news from her. Nick goes to visit Erin. He is afraid that the girl has committed suicide. Erin lives in Chinatown, and an elderly Chinese woman shows Nick the way to her house. Then lightning strikes a transformer box, wires spark, and Nick feels that something inside him has changed. The door to Erin's apartment is open. Inside, Nick finds a pill bottle and a suicide note, but Erin is alive. She sneaks up behind him and almost hits Nick with a tennis racket. After exchanging a few words with her, Nick realizes that he can no longer hear women's thoughts. He tells Erin that he wants to hire her to write advertising copy, and she agrees. Nick spends the whole day trying to call Darcy. However, Tanya answers the phone. He gets a call from Gingy, who tells him about Alex, who has been crying and calling her several times. Nick rushes to his daughter's graduation. Alex has locked herself in the bathroom and refuses to come out. It turns out she decided not to sleep with her boyfriend, and he immediately dumped her. Nick calms his daughter down and takes her home. However, he himself cannot sleep. Nick can get over the situation with Darcy. He goes to her house to explain himself. Nick tells her that all this time he used her ideas to survive in the company, but gradually fell in love with her. He proves to Darcy that he has really changed and asks her to come back, especially since his boss agrees to it. Darcy understands that Nick had to overcome his inhibitions because he needed to be saved, since he had never been so honest with a woman in his life. She loves him and therefore forgives him for his sins and asks him not to leave. Darcy kisses Nick, and he responds to her kiss.